Good morning. The May 2nd, 2023 Council Subcommittee on Water Issues is now in session. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Rusing.
Here.
Member Sishka.
Here.
And let the record reflect that Member Montoya is absent from today's meeting.
Let me make a comment. He may be absent and or excused. We're still trying to decide which one it is. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment. Public comment will be accepted following each agenda item and are limited to 3 minutes. Please complete a comment card and return it to the city clerk. Speakers will be called in the order received.
I don't think we're going to have any public comment in person here.
I don't think so.
I don't see anyone. Okay, let's move on.
Chair, I move approval of the April 4th meeting minutes.
Okay, I think she needs to read.
Oh, you
Need to read it first.
I do.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Give me just 1 second. Okay, item 4A, approval of the April 4th, 2023 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. Are we voting orally or
It should be up on the
electronically?
screen, but it did pass
Okay.
2-0.
Okay.
Okay, we can move on to item 4B, monthly PFAS update.
Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Very good to see you. Thank you, Steve Wolfert, Utilities Manager. I just wanted to do a brief discussion of our actions with our PFAS treatment operations. We've been working with our different math equations and trying to figure out what we might expect for a blending plan as we're nearing the high levels of demand. Right now, we're somewhere between 6.5 and 7 million gallons per day. Had a little spike up in Sunday. We had a lot of folks in town, so we pumped a lot more water. But as we're getting back into the season, the spring season, we are starting to see water demand increase. So we're going to need to start turning on different wells. To refresh your memory, we've been running Chino 2 and Chino 4 as our primary wells. Now we're going to have to start including Chino 5. Airport 2 and 3 are still operational and in service, and Airport 5 is out of service. And it will remain so until such a time as we make a decision as to what direction we plan on going with that well. So in making the evaluation, doing the evaluation on all the different wells and the combinations, we've been able to show once we get it out of draft, this is just a draft at this point, that no matter what the combination is of the wells in Chino Valley, mathematically speaking, we should be under the PFAS, the proposed PFAS MCLs, as well as the target range for arsenic. So that's really good news. The PFAS proposed rule really gives us a lot of freedom. Being at 4, it makes it obviously our wells are in the 3s and 2s, and so it makes it very easy for us to be in compliance. As a matter of fact, through the first draft, it looks like we may qualify for reduced monitoring once we gather enough information and we can prove to ADEQ that we are well within the levels required. We may only have to monitor routinely, like twice a year instead of 4 times a year. So that's a positive. We're hoping that that's going to remain true after we get through going through it. But there's some really good numbers coming out of those calculations.
Okay.
So Does anybody have any, we either have questions?
Yeah, Steve, do you have any comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, don't go away.
See me already shifting, huh?
I have a question about airport well number 5 being out of service. Do you anticipate it coming back onto service?
Not until we have decided the treatment technique for that.
Okay. So, like, say, 5 years from now, do you anticipate it to be in service, or if we do get a treatment plan for it?
In all honesty, I don't know.
Don't know.
I don't know what once the consultant comes back with the different options that we'll have,
Yeah.
then we'll have to evaluate those both financially and how they affect us operationally.
Because that was our newest and biggest well.
Yes, it is.
Came online a couple of years ago.
Just came off warranty.
Yeah.
I know.
And now it's out of service. So it looks like we're going to wait on the consultant to come up with a plan.
I just don't feel like we have any other options.
Okay.
We can't blend at that site in the current configuration.
Okay.
And we don't have a tank, or we don't have the infrastructure. So right now, the safest bet is for us just to leave it be, because we have to meet compliance at the entry point to the distribution system,
Yeah.
which that one has its own. So
Yeah.
that's the compliance point.
And what were the MCL? I mean, what was the level of the PFAS in number 5? Can you refresh
We're
my memory?
in PFOS, the OS, is hovering around 12 parts per trillion, and the PFOA is right around 9. But what also gets us in the new rule is something called a health index. And the health index is a combination of different compounds and how they work as a mixture. We also don't meet that as well.
Okay. All righty. Okay, that's good to know. And then I see we collected some samples at the end of March, on March 25th, and we haven't got the results back.
That's correct.
Is that unusual? I mean, is it a month turnaround usually, or?
And I need to correct that, because I was told this morning that it was actually early April. The samples got kicked to the next quarter, which is great, because we need
Okay.
second quarter results. But we should be seeing those anytime. 3 to 4 weeks is generally how long it takes. But also, we have to keep in mind that we're starting our testing for our unregulated contaminant rule, which is called UCMR, which is also all the PFAS species. So a lot of people are getting ahead of getting those done. That's a national thing. So I'm sure the labs are going to be flooded
Yeah.
with all the different, because I think we have to collect 30-something samples to meet that. And that's just with our infrastructure. I can't imagine some of the larger systems who are having to go through it.
Yeah. So as I understand it, the PFAS and PFOA levels, they're kind of like the two sentinels, but there are many other chemicals out there. And so we're just testing levels. This UCMR is just kind of like a basket of everything else that's out there.
The UCMR is 29 different species of PFAS, as well as lithium. And lithium is just another compound that they're checking to see what the prevalence is. That's what the UCMR gives us, is a precursor or look into the future of what may be regulated
Yes.
next. And so lithium is obviously on the list. But otherwise, the 29 others are PFAS
Yeah.
species.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to know that we're up to date on our testing and following all the guidelines, and looking towards the future to
Yes.
maintain a safe and adequate water system.
Absolutely. We're constantly monitoring every parameter that needs to be monitored by ADEQ, plus some that are outside of that, just to make sure that we're in compliance.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you. That's all I have. Anything, Steve?
I'm good, Kathy. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 4C, current residential and non-residential water budget overview for January 1, 2023 through April 19, 2023.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning. Brian Reese, Water Resources Manager for City of Prescott, and I just want to go over our water budget from the period just stated. So I'll go ahead and read off here from our Water Policy 11 through 13 established a semi-annual water budget for residential and non-residential projects. The budget set from January 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2023 for residential is 25 acres. And the non-residential budget for that same period was 25 acres. So moving right along, residential projects, since January 21st through April 19th of 2023, there were 5 residential projects totaling 11.93 acre feet approved. 2 of the projects were administratively exceeded the administrative threshold and were subsequently reviewed by this committee and the City Council. The total remaining residential budget is 13.07 acre feet. And for a little bit of context, since our last, our budget update, there was only one single-family residence added to the list, 0.17, you can see there. So,
Okay, I just would like to comment that it looks like most of these are like infill projects, and also we allocated water for the old City Hall site.
yeah, that was a big one. Exactly.
In preparation of future
In preparation,
construction.
exactly. So, yep, yes, right on. And moving to our, let's try this way. There we go. Moving to our non-residential projects. So, between the January 1st and April 19th, there were 10 non-residential projects approved, totaling 12.59 acre feet. Of these, 1 exceeded the administrative approval threshold, 1 acre foot, and was subsequently reviewed by the Water Issues Subcommittee. Total remaining non-residential budget for the remainder of the period is 12.41 acre feet, and same situation. Looks like there was 1 coffee shop that came in between the last budget report, 0.14 shown at the end of the table.
Okay, thank you.
And between January 1st and April 19th, there were 19 projects currently under existing contracts. 17 of these were single-family homes located primarily in groundwater subdivisions. Additionally, there was 1 subdivision plat and 1 multifamily complex approved under existing contracts. So we have a total number of residential dwelling units approved under existing contracts of 477, totaling 67.13 acre feet. Projects under existing contract are not included in the water budget that was set for this period. So, and it looks like since our last period, it looks like there's three of those groundwater subdivision lots were approved administratively through there. So, and that's about the extent of the update for this period. Do you have any questions at this point in time?
Steve?
Good, ma'am.
Okay. I would just like the public to realize that we had 477 units, that's 67.13 acre feet, approved under existing contracts. So when people see all the new apartments going in and the new plats being developed, they need to realize that that's water that was already approved, and it was basically, no pun intended, in the pipeline. And it looks like we had 67.13. That's kind of a little bit of a surge there, if you ask me, compared to what we had that was new water. You know, this is all old water, I guess.
Yeah, most of it came in that 1 multifamily project, as you can see there, second line down from the bottom.
Yeah.
458 units on that multifamily site.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Item 4D, discussion and presentation regarding the launch of the city's water conservation website.
Hello again, Brian Reese again here. On behalf of Kay Saida, who's on vacation this week, well deserved, I wanted to go ahead and give you a presentation over the new water conservation website for the city of Prescott that was recently launched. So for this presentation, we'll go over the grant and the website development process, and then look at the website through. So what various categories, information, tips, and even our rebate program calendars and all kinds of things that are available on the website at this point in time. So through Arizona Department of Water Resources Water Management Assistant Program, we were able to attain a grant of $10,000 to create this website. The Water Management Assistance Program is created in order to help create conservation efforts through websites and other efforts, programs. And the resources for that program come from the annual water dues taken from active management areas by ADWR every year. And they put that money, some of that money aside for these programs. So the city of Prescott applied for this grant. And it was on February 28th, 2022, that the city of Prescott made a presentation in front of the Prescott Groundwater Users Advisory Committee, detailing what we wanted this grant for and what we wanted to do for it. And that committee voted unanimously to approve the grant in the amount of $10,000. ADWR director sent this nice letter that's shown on the slide here, acknowledging our grant, and that kicked us off. So the grant process had certain task requirements. One of the requirements was to obtain a professional web designer to design the web page. So we did that through Mrs. Sadie Sarte, professional designer. So she helped us go through this web page that we'll kind of take a look at here in a few seconds. It was required that we have weekly progress reports and meetings going through the design process, which were conducted. And then a final design had to be reached where the city approved the various categories. These categories were determined to be indoor and outdoor water use and drought information incentive program, and we'll walk through the rest of them. But and then the final category that had to be, or task that had to be fulfilled, is after completion of the website, data collection and a final report process. So the city's in the process of collecting information on the number of hits for each of the categories in the website at this point, and then a report will be prepared detailing that data collection effort and how the website is doing. So when you go to the city's main webpage right now, there's this WHAM tile that shows up promptly in the center, which can be clicked and it'll take you right to the water conservation website. A second way of getting to the website is up at the top of the screen along the red ribbon, second from the last, the water and sewer tab. Once clicked on that, we'll pull down to water conservation, and when that's clicked, it will go directly to the water conservation website homepage, which is shown right here. So this will bring you directly linked to this site. Across the top of the site are the various categories for the website. It's the homepage, outdoor category, indoor category, drought preparation, education and activities, the rebate incentive program, the event calendar, and the blog. So we'll just kind of walk through this, what you'll see as you go through. Clicking the outdoor category brings you to the outdoor portion of the site. This is kind of the page scrolls down quite a bit further than this, but we didn't want, it's limited to these still sites, can only show so much. So this is kind of the start at home portion of the web page, and it shows you your outdoor tips for conserving water, available for your yard, fertilizing, timing of your water use, just a lot of information on there. As you continue to scroll down the web page, it has more information on various ways to conserve water on an outdoor effort. Going back here too, there's another, as you can see, there's a little arrow on the outdoor there, meaning that when you click on it, that gives you two options. So the second option will take you to the watershed smart outreach section of the report, and basically this gives good information on watershed, stormwater, pollutants, and water making its way into the storm drains in the city, which eventually makes its way to the lakes and the creeks. So it has information on that for the public to understand the importance of not putting chemicals and other items in the streets that meet their way to the storm drain system. And there's also really good links, probably a half a dozen good links to other sources of good information on that, including Prescott Creek's pamphlet and various other agencies. So moving on, indoor, the next category on clicking in will bring you to the indoor water conservation page, and it just kind of walks you through the house, starting in the kitchen, moving into the bathroom, and then moving into various other whole home concepts of conserving water. So a lot of good information there. Next category, drought prep. Will bring the user to two good drought information pages, one supplied by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and the other one supplied by NOAA and the National Integrated Drought Information System. So one of our big categories was to keep the public informed on the current drought situation, so that they have a good understanding. So that was why it has a separate tab on its own. Education and activities tab, when clicked on, provides a lot of information on various ways to educate yourself or others on water conservation. It's broken into three categories. You have the youth category, a category for teachers, and a category for adults. So a lot of good information on that page. One of the main features of the page, the rebate and incentive program, which we strongly encourage the public to take advantage of, brings the user to this portion of the web page, giving them all the information they need in order to understand how they can utilize this rebate program and conserve water in their own house. So as of April 18th, so at that cutoff date, from the start of the webpage, which I think might have only been about 1 week prior to that, we had already had a 215 count on the rebate page. So that's looking promising. Maybe we can come in with some updates in a couple months on that too, and see how that's working. Or maybe at the time of the final report would be a good idea. So kind of maneuvering through the page gives all the information on the opportunities, the requirements, and the rebate amounts for all of the options that we have in the program. Event calendar, clicking on, this is where the city will continue to to keep the public current on all of the events that are happening throughout the month for water conservation. We have our 30 days tips for Water Awareness Month in April, and continue to keep that information fresh on the website through the event calendar. And then clicking on the blog, there's probably a good 15 or 20 blogs already on the website. Kay started creating blogs probably about right around the same time she started creating the website. So she's already pre-populated a bunch of good information on water conservation, and her goal is to create a blog every month and keep it going. So sooner or later we might have to cut out a few of those older blogs, but it looks like we were able to have 20 or 30 good blogs at any given time on the website based on what I see at this point. So all in all, that's our water conservation website, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer.
Well, thank you for standing in for Kay.
Sure.
And Steve, I'll let you go first.
You know, Kathy, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you guys go along, if there's any advice or anything that you see on there that you think might add to what we're trying to accomplish on it, please let us know.
Okay, well, I'll
Yeah.
start right now with that.
Okay.
My first question, I see we have an address, but people can Google it if they want to and come up with, like PrescottWater.com is going to be a separate address, so you don't have to go to the website.
Exactly. Going back, I'll just shift back through here. In fact, there's a couple different addresses that are available. Oh, there we go. So, yep, exactly. And it's kind of shown on both pages. I think it's basically the same address there, but yes, definitely. You could go directly to PrescottWater.com and get to the web page.
Okay, because we have so many new people coming into town. They're in their new home. They're staring at their dirt backyard, wondering what they should do as far as outdoors and watering. So I can imagine them wanting to just kind of Google it, and this would take them to
Right
to the
Exactly.
website. I would like to make a comment under the education element.
Okay.
I see under kids, teachers, and adults resources that you do mention the Citizens Water Advocacy Group, and I think that is a wonderful thing to include. Is there going to be like a link to their website or something to direct them to that?
I'm not sure at this point. I'm not sure. I guess we could link that up. So.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Gwen Roach, Deputy Public Works Director. So each one of these tabs does link to their particular website.
Okay.
So we didn't want to recreate the wheel. We just wanted to grow on what was already out there. So if you click on the Citizen Water Advocacy Group, it will take you directly
Okay.
to their website.
Great.
Yes, and here we just give some examples of the information they could potentially find on each of those
Yes.
partner sites.
Okay, I just wanted to emphasize that. And the Salt River Project, ADEQ, a lot of information. And I just want to stress to the public that our water conservation program is totally voluntary. And one way to get public cooperation is through public education. And I think this is one way to inform the public so they understand the rationale as to why we need to save water. And you've got this broken down to indoor and outdoor elements. And as we all know, it's the outdoor watering that uses the bulk of our drinking water. And I think that you do a pretty good job, but do you know if there's anything in there about washing cars, to educate people about washing their cars at home versus going to the car wash? Or maybe
I didn't see anything specifically on car washing at this point. Let me take a look at that. When Kay gets
Yeah.
back, we can talk a little bit and
Yeah.
see where that.
Because I think, that we live in Arizona, and it's okay to have a little dust on your car. You don't need to keep it clean and shiny. And then also, do you know if there's a link to our plant palette and landscaping?
Yeah, I do think there's a link to the plant. Drought tolerant plants for
Yes.
for the area. Let me see if it comes up on here. It may just be past the down below the screenshot of the slide page in which we put it at. But I think. Yeah, in looking through the website, I'm sure there was a link
Right.
to the drought tolerant
Yeah,
plants.
so that if people are going to
in the outdoor section.
plant a tree, they have a choice. They can plant an avocado or an almond, which would be a high water user, or they could plant something that's more low water
Yeah, definitely.
user, like
Yeah,
a
kind of-
desert willow or something.
Sculpt their whole landscape approach for their outdoors based on plants that need less water, and that means needs less maintenance from them, which is actually helpful to me anyway. So
And then, let's see if I have another comment. I think that, also indoor, you have an element on the kitchen use, saving water, and you mentioned composting. I think that would be the perfect place to pitch our city composting program that we have at the farmers market, instead of just suggesting that people save their food scraps and throw them in a hole in their backyard and throw some dirt on it or something.
yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, something a little more collaborative with our farmers market and the official composting program.
Yeah, we'll make sure there's a link to that,
Okay, well, thank you.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
information on that. So
Well, this is very exciting, and thank you, everyone, for your efforts in
thank you.
creating
Appreciate it.
this website. Okay, thank you very much.
Item 4E, discussion and presentation regarding an overview and status update on the water resource management model.
Good morning, Leslie Grazer, Public Works.
Good morning, Leslie.
Good morning. I'm going to refer to your memo first. So if you flip to that, we don't post that up anymore, I was told this morning. So because it has the information that helps guide you through, I think, this PowerPoint a little bit more. So the item summary was a brief summary providing an overview of the water resource management model as it relates to the 2022 water management policy. So that's the gist of today, is trying to see that linkage. So you have a lot of different products that are being developed through Public Works, interdepartment sometimes, of course with other departments is what I'm saying. So having those things align actually gives you a better end product for the city. So we're going to talk about how even internally we need to have some alignment between the water resource management model and the current policy. The other piece was the status of the annual update of this water resource management model, so we can touch on that as well. Just for a little bit of history, I went back to the 2015 general plan because that is also in front of us now. There's a general plan group. And at that time, the city's water resource management staff identified the need for the development of a long-term water management plan. So this is nothing new, but now here again, you need to see linkages on what that looks like. In that plan at the time, and I had the pleasure of sitting through and working through that plan, in 10.4 water resources, it says the DNO, which is your decision order of assured water supply, is based on ADWR examination using 7 criteria that include physical availability, legal, continuous, I should just run those 3 together, physical, legal, and continuous availability for 100 years, and other qualifiers. So those were the biggies. And it said at that time, now that the city's current and future water rights have been determined, and what that statement is saying is that at that time, and more so 2011, moving into your 2015 general plan, your decision order was being litigated. And so, but it said at that point we knew that it was coming out of the courts, and having that, that's basically your, it's like the core of your peach. You know, you have to know what's happening with that to have that piece of fruit, if we want to use that terminology, be good. We have to have a good core to it and understand that's your central point. So from there, the formulation of a long-term water management plan can occur to apply those resources to the city's needs. This plan will take into account all supplies recognized in the DNO. So we have different categories within the DNO: groundwater, surface water, treated effluent, and imported supplies, which is your big Chino, as well as all conservation and appropriate contributions by Prescott towards meeting safe yield in the AMA. So there was some very clear language in your current and what will become your previous general plan here in the coming years. Further, all supplies will need to be assessed for their best and highest use to secure water for future generations. Because different supply types have different rules, and they also have can be used in different ways in a community. You might not want to be putting your potable supplies in the future onto irrigation. You want to be probably moving towards your reclaimed supplies a little more, if you can do that. But this is a long and detailed conversation because there are a lot of nuances. So moving ahead in your memo, it states the first step towards a city's long-term water management plan was the development of a tool to house all your supply and demand data. So it's hard to have a plan if you don't have all of your pieces together. So a lot of effort was put into that to invest the time. And that was so we could run current and future scenarios. So you never get exactly what you want in the future. You know, you might expect it to look a certain way, but things change. And so the city had a long-term management discussion while they were trying to make it through their 2005 decision order, then into their 2007, which they were doing an additive of the Big Chino Water Ranch, the imported supplies. And they had kind of one future look. And thankfully, we have the same consultant as we had at that time. And we were of the same mindset that we need to have multiple roads available to the city. Some will be plowed a little more seriously, and some might be a little weedy, but we know it's there. And if our futures go that direction, we can open up that road if we need to. So this data repository, it was known as a long-term management model, was renamed in 2018 as the Water Resource Management Model, or the WRM. So that's how it came to be. This WRM was referenced in the city's 2019 City Water Management Policy that was adopted November of 2019, as I just mentioned. And then it was next referenced in the 2022 Water Management Policy. Within both documents, and as you are aware, we have a current mayor's ad hoc. We're seeing that the tool is not employed. The way it's employed is fairly limited in those policies right now. It's somewhat there in name, but maybe not in its full, robust abilities. So we can look at that a little bit more. So the WRM, even though you've had several presentations on this, you know, they kind of have some distance between them, and you have other things that you need to think about besides just a water resource management model. So as a reminder, the WRM is actually an Excel-based, spreadsheet-driven tool, and it also includes a GIS component, because having that visual is priceless in terms of saving time and communicating what might be on one person's mind versus another, or which landmass, I like to say, we're speaking to. So we use that for data set analysis, the mapping side, and for visual presentation. The GIS aspect of the WRM will not be operated in this meeting today. It requires a remote connection. We don't have the abilities to do that as we did in the former, or maybe we will in time, but right now we're doing PowerPoint slides, not doing a full GIS model on the screen for you to work through with us. So I have static pictures that we can look at today. And last, before we move into the actual PowerPoint, is that we are doing, of course, an annual update. We're seeing the need that we might do that twice a year, depending on making this tool more used and not as limited as we're seeing right now. And based on the consultant a couple weeks ago, it was about 98% complete. So we're taking a little bit more time. We have that GIS staff member now who's also learning. It's an information transfer from the consultant to the city. So there's 2 of us sitting in on those meetings. And we have staff that, because you really do need to have strong GIS skills to do the manipulations you need to do within that update process. And then you also want to be having the developer, the consultant, looking over the shoulder and saying, yep, we have some nuances there where we can't do things exactly the way we want it, or that point, yes, is not falling, that metering point is not clear in the billing record, so it's landing somewhere else in space, and we make those fixes as we identify those things. So that's your warm-up. And I usually don't send you to your last slide in your PowerPoint, but I think this is actually a good place to start. So we're going to start here, and I don't believe we have pointer ability. That makes it a little challenging. So let me see if I can read you the legend first. So understanding, what does this cover? So within the static shot that we have, the Prescott AMA is the purple line, and to the right of it is inside the AMA, and the left of it is outside the AMA. Then where the city started with their data repository was looking at the service area. So that's going to be the blue line, and I apologize, I can't point that out necessarily, but you can see a blue line that runs throughout this map and up into Chino Valley. And basically where you're seeing points within that blue line, that's your service area. That's where you're serving right now. And then the general plan area. So as I started this conversation, we are seeing, of course, you have to have linkage among your different documents, models, different products of the city. So within the WORM, of course, we also look at the general plan boundary, and we know that's going to be changing in some of our recent conversations. There's been some movement over the years since the last one. And then we look at the green, any point feature. So a green point feature is your current demand, and we're going to hold these colors into the future and not let anybody change these colors because it will get confusing if we don't do that. And we have maintained those. The yellow is your committed. In the model, it speaks to virtual. And then purple is your projected, which is your future. And so we use a couple words interchangeably, but we're going to be probably using more so the ADWR terminology because that keeps everybody on the same page. So this map is available if anybody would like to have a copy of this. We're more than happy to generate that for you and put the appropriate, mapping notations on it that it should have, so date and title and those kind of things. So with the WORM, I've stressed this probably multiple times, but it's probably good to hear it again. We have different versions, and so we have the water service area version because we need to look at that for typically DNO and for probably day-to-day or month-to-month, year-to-year discussions that we have, what's happening within the service area. Be aware that our service area does have the potential to change slightly each year as water lines are extended. That's through our Department of Water Resources requirements with our annual reporting that we show where we've extended lines, and they push out the buffer around our system a little bit, so that will change over time. The next one, different version that we have is a general plan version. And so at this time, actually several weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point, I was back in contact with the consultant. Although they were working to update it, I said we're going to need to come right on the heels with the general plan version and have that ready for discussions that are planned for July at that committee. And let's see if I'm missing another important boundary. I don't necessarily think so. The third version is going to be your decision and order. So even though we can look at things a certain way ourselves, if you're going to be filing your decision and order or your decision order of assured water supply designation, you have to follow the state rules. And so we're working through that process right now, as you're aware. That was filed in December of 2021. Okay, let's jump back up to the front now that you have a lay of the land, because you don't see this on a daily basis like we do. So now it's a question of, how, if it's being used fairly limited, what can we look at to see that kind of indication, and what can we do better into the future? So this worm version is dated June of 2022. And that's also important to know, because if you're looking at it from different time periods, you might see different things along the way as it's updated. This is the version that we're looking at, was the presentation version that we had, because we needed to have it fairly light so it would actually operate at council chambers at the other building. So in particular, and I'm so used to having a pointer and I can't do that. So luckily I highlighted in that bluey green a parcel within the water resource management model. And it's looking at Water Service Agreement 22-046, which you saw on your other sheet today, a multifamily development there. So this one was administratively approved. It came in at 458 multifamily residential units for 63.84 acre feet. Now the concerns, and this is understanding your tools and using them properly, the WORM didn't have any of this in its planning, the 458 multifamily units. So, and then you can see within that blue area that's highlighted, there's no points. As you can see in other parts of that picture, there's green points that are your existing current demand, people who are already using water, and you can see a little bit of yellow where we know we had a commitment. Or I think in this slide, we don't see any purple at this point, but in another one, I think you will. So this is concerning because you could overrun your model by putting in more than it was planning for. So the ADWR requirement for groundwater allowance increase, this is concern number 2, may not be met. This area didn't preliminary plat in 1998. So now we're getting into details that water resource managers understand that we've worked with for many years. The detail here is for the city to receive groundwater increase for certain areas, it had to be preliminary platted. On this slide, I didn't put in that information, but we know that very clearly where certain master plans were preliminary platted and where they weren't. So this will be an additive demand that the model wasn't aware of. The last one is the policy doesn't define the time frame of an existing contract, nor are there any other requirements that need to be reviewed. So if staff wasn't given procedures to do more than apply a 0.17 to a new application coming in, or a 0.12 if it's multifamily in this case, we're not using this tool to its fullest extent, and it's not, you're losing some of the protections that you might need over time. So this is one example, and I'm happy to
Leslie, yeah, we
Yes.
have some questions
Oh,
here.
okay.
Steve, you go first.
Thanks, Kathy. Excuse me. So are we saying that this part of Prescott Lakes was not included in the WORM, even though Prescott Lakes was allocated a certain amount of water in the beginning and this wasn't included in it?
That's correct, because it doesn't qualify for a groundwater allowance, so the city hadn't planned to serve that. So although there are contracts, you also have other commitments that are understandings you should have related to state law and your decision in order and what you have filed for and what you haven't filed for. So with this piece, I think that's where you have a disconnect in your policy right now, is there wasn't an understanding during policy development of these nuances that they should be aware of to protect the city from having additional use where you weren't expecting it. So to your question, no, the WORM did not identify water for this because there were reasons behind why it wouldn't be identified. Within the master plan, the folks that were involved in that way back when, you have to read your history and know your history. They split up the water supplies, and even though there's this lump sum volume that identifies number of units, there's more to it than just that.
Let me back
So-
up here. Of course, the map is very poorly identified as to what we're talking about. We're talking about that parcel of land on the side of the hill below Astoria on the corner of the Highway 89 and Prescott Lakes Parkway, up there behind the fountains, the waterfalls. Okay, for the public, I just want them to realize this is the parcel that we're talking about. And I am somewhat shocked to see that 63.84 acre feet were approved administratively. Is that what that says? How did that happen?
That's how your policy works right now. So I think through your mayor's ad hoc group, that's part of our tasking is to go through and see, the mayor had said, how effective is this policy? And so we've done the work and compared different, tools that we have to identify these things. So these things can be addressed.
You're talking about the 2022 policy?
Correct.
So it was obviously a loophole that was in there because...
I think it's a misunderstanding. As I said, I think that these disconnects have happened probably since, 2018, 2019 with a policy shift. And then there was another shift back to a previous kind of policy look. But a lot of the underpinnings or the supports were removed. And so you can equate that to a house, So if you had a strong foundation and you built on it, you're pretty good. But if you started taking away different parts of the foundation and thought you could build the same way and it wouldn't lean or do something, that you weren't expecting, then you have to address the foundational issues. And so I think this is one that we can address.
Because I can't remember the number exactly, but there was a cap on how much water could be approved administratively in this water policy. So I don't know
this
how
one, is
happened.
falling under the existing. So that is a little challenging in terms to try to answer your question. Is existing at one time was something that was pre-1998. That was existing. And so now this word existing is being used for anything that was put into contract.
Oh, I see what you mean, existing.
From the 2018 to, I'm not sure where existing cuts off. So that's another, like a definition that would help staff know exactly, it's tricky, if somebody goes, oh, it already has a contract, it's good, but there's more details that are involved sometimes with contracts and water negotiations, and also policies and not policies, but codes and other planning documents the city has had in the past. If those weren't full, people weren't fully aware of them. So we're not trying to call out one, particular piece of land. It's hard not to,
this is
unless
a
you have an
perfect
example, it's hard. So we're not, we're not saying anything negative about the developer or the piece of land or the master plan area or the community or the people who live there. It's just that if you've asked the staff to go through and find out if your policy is effective, then you should be expecting, a mix where there are some things that are effective and then there are some that are not. And then once we know what those are, those can be worked on and remedied.
So this parcel was considered existing, and the problem is there's no time frame.
This has an existing contract, and that's pretty much all that seems to be looked at when a water service agreement comes in or a PAC comes in for review, a piece of land. So it needs to have a little more review on it to make sure that we're, really in sync and that our tools that we say we're relying on actually dovetail with what we're doing.
So it never came before this committee?
No, this one didn't, because it was part of your existing,
Okay.
I think it's the last one that Brian presented was that existing
Right.
workup. So we can look at one more. We have a second example. This wasn't intended to be a big deep dive into this today. It's just to give you examples so that as the subcommittee, your tasking through your resolution is that you're policy oriented. And so we want to make sure we take the time kind of stay with the tools that are being developed and the policies that are in place at this time.
Steve?
Thanks, Kathy. Listen, we're not what I'm questioning is, so this was all part of the water allocation for the Prescott Lakes Master Plan, and somehow this fell out as far as what the WORM understood?
It has to, because we didn't have any legal authority to seek groundwater allowance for it from the state. So this is another level of understanding, and we can dig into it more today, or we can bring you, but the reason why, you have a master plan, and when that master plan was coming online, or trying to come online in 1998, when the area was being declared out of safe yield. So anything that had a preliminary plat and moved to a final plat would be awarded more supplies. So the city has to kind of sit back and watch as these things develop and have those pieces ready. You used to have your community development staff that would have memos that distinctly said, this is a preliminary plat area in a groundwater subdivision that can seek groundwater allowance. It is now being final platted. All this would be brought before the council. So with your current policy, it's moving through administratively and probably not getting as much attention to the details that are needed as it should.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Okay, I can do that. Okay, so here's just another look to show, once again, what the worm knew versus.
Can you verify where this is located?
I'm happy to. Yeah, sorry about that.
Figure it out.
See, I can do. You're right behind the mall. Does that help? That's the Gateway Mall.
Now I got
Right
I got
behind
it.
and then
Palmer Apartments.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and then you can see that the ranch subdivision is south of there. So, okay, so once again, same version of the worm. This is our presentation mode of June 2022. And the water service agreement is listed there. It has a file date. It didn't have an approval date on it yet, and I think maybe the system's just being caught up. But you did have this come before council for approval. It was 209 multifamily units receiving 55.25 acre feet. So the concerns here is that area that's highlighted in blue. The worm had 36 multifamily residential units anticipated. So you can see there's purple dots. So there were discussions with the landowners there. This one has a whole bunch of details behind it. So this one, water supplies, let's see if I can break this down fairly simply. When water needed to be piped, and when a water line needed to be put in place to get water to Yavapai Hills, it went through what was called the Bullwhacker Ranch. And so the Bullwhacker Ranch said, well, if you're going to put a line through our ranch, then we need to have an understanding of how much water we get in the future. And so a lot of those old agreements were pretty vague. I don't think anybody expected the area to grow as it did, but that's what happened. So people should, here's what happens. With a lot of our very old agreements, the landowner comes back in and seeks clarifications because there wasn't an active management area at the time of that Bullwhacker water line going through to Yavapai Hills. There was no such thing as an AMA. There was no such thing at the time of being declared out of safe yield. So they came back in the 2015 time frame, and we did our best because the ownership there was working with the bank to try to bring forward some housing, multifamily housing, and that was definitely needed by the city. So it was a good workable plan. So we pushed forward and said, yep, you can have water for it. And then we looked at, okay, what are our remaining obligations of the city? And those were also starting to be defined. So we have other maps, and I didn't put those in showing the obligations. But the bottom line here is that now we have this water resource management tool, and that's our data repository, and it knows what we know about growth and then how we can run scenarios on that to see, when we start hitting margins that, we want to watch things even more closely. So as you can see, there was 36 multifamily. What has been approved is 209. Due to the level of demand, the 209 multifamily residential not recognized in the WORM. It is also not recognized in our 2001 DNO application. So this happened approved. So you have kind of a double step that we have to be able to walk back. We can't change it now. You don't go back and tell somebody who said you can get water for it. But now is the time, as I said, to look at the effectiveness that we were asked to look at between policy. What is your policy actually doing? What is your staff actually asked to do when they approve different applications? And what level of detail do we need to be at? Because at this point, as we're updating the WORM with the 2022 billing data, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we can update this, but it's also going to throw our numbers out of whack, which we already filed with the Department of Water Resources as to what that was looking like.
So let me just make a comment. When we approve water, we're always told it's within the WORM. It's already okay. It's in the WORM. And you're telling me that we weren't given this information because it's obviously wasn't in the WORM.
Yeah, I think there's a level of checking and procedures that are probably needed, it looks like, with your 2022 policy to
No, I'm just
make sure
talking
there's a
about
step. Yeah,
staff
a step,
presentations, and then we find out it wasn't recognized in the latest DNO.
Right. We turned it in with points like this saying these are your projected and sought water for 36, not for 209. So we'll be working on that, as I mentioned. So here again, just a couple examples. Once again, it was because there was, you have multiple, I guess, groups working on things. You have, staff that's approving requests that come in. You have a mayor's ad hoc that's working. You're going to have more activity in your general plan as that group continues and moves towards talking about water. You have this tool that is built to move towards a long-term management plan, which is kind of the stepstone, right? So you have a plan. From your plan, if you have the example I've used recently is if in your plan you want to have a 80 gallons per capita per day goal, then you start setting your policies and your codes to help achieve that. And then once you have your codes in place to help achieve that and your policies in place, then you have a procedure that rolls out so your staff understands how you're going to help run that all the way back through the chain to meet your planning goals.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to the 36 units, multifamily residential units. When the property owner purchased that land, was he aware that he only had 36 multifamily residential units planned in water?
What he was, and here again, there's details for each, not all pieces of land, but there are some that have long histories, and we have to respect and meet city obligations. This one, as I'd mentioned, and we don't have the slide for it right now, but I had a secondary slide that you could see where there were different properties based on that legal document of moving water through their ranch to Yavapai Hills. There was going to be commitments and pieces of land that we were going to commit water to. And those potentially can be shifted around. We might have the ability to do some shifting. You see a lot of purple points to the right, to the left, although that's state land, so I believe. So I think the quickest is to say, we have to read our documents. We have to know more than just 0.17 and 0.12. If we have histories that have obligations that need to be met, or we don't have obligations that we have to meet, or if there's shifts that need to be made, we need to think through some of these bigger pieces.
You've illustrated this with two very good examples that I find somewhat shocking And how many more examples, how many more parcels are out there that the worm has underestimated or correctly estimated, but we didn't know, at least I didn't know about any of this?
So that's a work in progress through the mayor's ad hoc committee. So I don't have a firm number. We had other examples we could have brought, but I think these two kind of give you an idea in the time frame that you have of what we're working with to make sure things, align the way they need to and are ready for general plan. Because you'll need to know, ultimately, there's a decision point of if you have this much water in contract, you're currently using a certain amount, okay? Then you have this much committed to somebody through a contract, but you also potentially have commitments that are projected out but not platted. You need to know that whole picture so you're not, over-committing yourself or double committing in some ways.
I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to know the whole picture, and I feel that we haven't been getting the whole picture because every time we approve water, it says in our packet, and it's in the worm. Meaning, you're under the impression that you're following this tool and utilizing this tool. And now I'm finding out we're not.
Well, I think you have more, I guess maybe thankfully, you have a tool that can really help guide your future. And that tool needs to be worked more than just saying, okay, we have something come in and it's 0.17, let's work up the number. Oh, it's existing. We need a little bit more definition through there. And these are exactly the things that we're trying to get at, although there's a lot of activity and winding of things through the policy that if you think you tackle it in one policy number, it pops up somewhere else and then it pops up somewhere else. And we need to be real careful about being too aggressive where we're like, yeah, I'll just fix that, because you might find yourself making a problem over here when you thought you fixed it over here because of that winding of landscape use. Water use is a good one. So I'll just stop there.
Okay.
But we'll look at a couple more slides based on time. I'm not sure where we're at. We need a clock in here, but
It's 10:40.
10:40.
Oh, 10:36. to be
10:36. Is it okay to wrap in 2 minutes or so?
Actually, I have nothing else to do for another hour.
Oh, no.
so.
Okay, well, I'll just show you one more slide. And this is, once again, your policy interconnect you have as a water issues subcommittee. Is we're looking at policy 10, and it says new non-residential development project shall return no less than 75% of the water sold as wastewater. So I'm just taking a clip, trying not to, we would have way too many slides if I put the whole text in there, but you get the idea. There was supposed to be a 75% return. So the concerns are related to the policy is that effluent return flow analysis for our decision order showed a possibility of 70% return, but we use a 65% to be conservative. So we filed with the department prior to this policy being approved. We had already filed that we were looking at 65%. So we don't have any basis necessarily for that 75% is the concern. If we're putting in our legal documents that we're probably close to 70, we can kind of, be okay with that. But in water supplies, you tend to be a little bit on the conservative side. The second item is the city doesn't have a way to ensure compliance with this policy's return flow requirement, either before or after approving water supplies. So here again, you have to choose what you put into policies. If you can actually do it, it probably shouldn't be in the policy. It gives kind of not necessarily the impression that you want. Looking at number 2, there policy 14, the appeal 50% rule. In December 22, there was a clarification to it, which basically says you don't have to subtract that from anything. And I know that's brought up a lot of questions along the way. So the volume is not subtracted. This is a concern from the remaining supplies. So the policy states something like 1,900 and change in there. So if you're not subtracting it from anywhere, yet it's a real demand to the worm, you could start having, more disconnect. That real demand could be more demand than the worm has planned for that APN or parcel. So that would go back to the pictures we just looked at. So what do we do in that situation? And the last one, Policy 15, water supplies associated with an existing contract shall not be amended to increase the number of lots or volume used. Any such proposal to increase the number of lots or volume shall require a new water service agreement.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, and that's a huge loophole that needs to be closed. And also, is there any reason why this PowerPoint wasn't included in our packet or anything?
Probably my fault.
Oh, because I would have
I
been
was
a
still
lot
working
better
on it last
prepared.
Friday, so I took some time away and tried to get this done ahead of time. But so we had the skeleton of this ready to go in the pieces, but
Okay. Well, maybe
we were
you
also kind of running down a DNO situation and some other situations.
Yeah, I know.
So I apologize.
Maybe,
We'll try to have them in the packet next time.
or maybe get us a copy, as soon as we
I
can.
think we have them due. I think by noon on Fridays. So it should have been transferred, and maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Last Friday.
I never got it. So it'd be helpful if we could get all this information so we could be better prepared and have a more comprehensive discussion about it.
Okay. I'll do my best. I apologize. I will take that one because I did take
Yeah.
some time
Maybe
away.
you did send it over, but it just never got printed out for us.
Could be. So just to wrap up, the forward efforts. Now we're back at the last slide, which is where we started. So you had a map, but what we're looking at is you need alignment with your 2022 policy, your general plan update, your long-term management plan, the mayor's ad hoc, and some interdepartmental coordination. And that last one is that there is a lot of coordination that needs to happen between community development and water supplies. Usually, land and water go hand in hand. And you have a great group over there. We just need to set forth some of those things that make it easier for everybody. And for that one, the first step is, community development did recognize within the policy that they really struggle with policy 1 and getting a site plan or, how that kicks off for the applicant. If those kind of things with their input can smooth out the process from the staff side and also makes it smoother for the applicant as well, maybe not so many hurdles to get over, then that could be a value too. So you really have a lot of different things that could be potentially addressed in a policy, and that will be more of a discussion, I think, later than what you have today.
Councilman Shishka?
Thank you, Em. This kind of, looks forward to possibly the council needing a refresh on what is included in the worm and how does the worm look at this kind of stuff. A question I have is the Big Chino Water Ranch included in the available sources of water in the worm?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow, that was one word.
Yeah.
Usually it doesn't get. I
That was
usually
great.
can't give a one-word answer.
But I guess, to follow up on my initial question, can we get a study session or something going with, what is, for a lot of these new council people, they don't even know what's in the worm. And so, can we get something that basically goes, a session that describes what's in the worm and how it interacts with the DNO and things like that?
I think that's possible, and I think what would probably be helpful in that water supplies is a heavy lift, and the only way the city had been able to do that before is you did have regular e-sessions on water, especially when you had a new council come in, whether it be 2 new or 3 new or whatever it might be. Even if you had your existing group, everybody was reelected and stayed. You had regular e-sessions on water, so you understood your water rights. You understood some of the underlying, state rules. You understood some of your history and why you did what you did, and also that future planning. So I think maybe
Is
that might
something that
be.
needs to go on in an e-session, or can we
If we were
discuss it
talking
in
water
public?
rights, you did. There are other pieces we don't. So that'll be a discussion for management to decide which qualifies. It's not for me to decide, but in the past, if we brought in an attorney, our specialized water attorney, and we were discussing something that would affect the city's water rights potentially, that was e-session level discussions.
Okay, well, I'm not really talking about water rights. I'm just talking about explaining the worm re-explaining the worm to council.
We can do that, yeah. As I said, you've been getting little
Yeah, I agree,
updates.
Steve. I think that's
now and then.
that's a good idea to have a study session about it.
Excuse me.
I will turn that over to Brian and Deputy Public Works Director and others
Yeah.
to decide when that will be scheduled.
And also, I have a comment. Can you go back to your the recommendations that the subcommittee, water subcommittee, is working on?
Uh-oh. Just, uh-oh. Look at the window.
Time up. We timed out. There you go.
Page.
On policy 15, can we bring that? I mean, what do you think, Steve? It seems to me that we don't want to be sitting on that loophole any longer than we should be. Bring that to council sooner than later for amending to close that loophole there, where if there's a change, you know, like what happened at Palmer for the Palmer Apartments, if there's a change like that that affects how much water, that we need to know about it. And they need a new application, and it should be brought to the
Yeah, I think they do get a
Issues
new
subcommittee.
application started, but then the details of looking into it, as far as you need to, the staff doesn't have those kind of procedures in place for them to follow.
Well, that's
But
pretty
to
clear
your-
cut, but I think
your-
maybe we should change that as soon as we can.
So to your point, there is a quarterly update that is scheduled for the council from the ad hoc, and these are listed. So that's you're doing the lead-in for that meeting.
So is it
And
like next
we'll
month?
have this noted on the record here, and then that's the 9th. Am I right? I'm
So
still
the
trying to
next
get my
meeting?
dates straight
Oh,
because we're
okay.
already in May. How did that happen? Weren't we just in January?
Yeah.
So you'll have another look at this and more. So the ad hoc has already provided some basic recommendations where they're going to need to say, or staff will come before you again and be like, okay, we can't fix it all at once, but are there certain things that you want the commission to address first and bring back to you, hopefully in a time frame you can do, which timeframes aren't looking so good based on some of the timetables I was given in an email the other day for getting things lined up so you can do some policy adjustments before your next budget cycle that starts in July.
So is there any way we can find out? You think it's going to be, this presentation by the ad hoc committee is going to be May 9th, next week?
May 9th, right? Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty
It
quick.
takes more than one brain sometimes to.
Ask
Yeah.
what
Okay.
shall be given. Yeah.
Thank you, because
bet.
as you know, I guess there's a known number of other examples out there that you're trying to get a handle on. Could be hundreds, thousands, maybe
50,
50. Well, that's a lot.
maybe.
Yeah.
We have to finish our work. It's
Okay.
It's important to actually go through the tool, and
Okay.
I think that's part of the challenge too. Is that the worm was brought forward and put into policies by name, without it being exercised fully, and running through different cross checks.
Okay.
And then once that was done, then you also have to have your procedures in place for your staff, so they. If that's really all the city wants to do is do a 0.15, or 0.17, 0.12 when something comes in,
Yeah.
then you need to realize you might have some greater use than maybe you anticipated or than we filed with the state
Okay.
in
And
an
I
active
just
DNO process.
and I want to thank you for all your hard work and dedication over the years. to water for our city and our community. You've done a wonderful job. In fact, I think a lot falls on your shoulders. You could probably use 2 or 3 assistants.
Oh, well, I'm Gwen's assistant and Brian's assistant. I'm not anybody. I don't have any. Yeah. This is the
Okay.
group. So
All right.
happy to help.
Thank you. That was a very eye-opening, up-to-date presentation about the worm, and it asked. I have a lot more questions, and I really think that we do need to make a presentation, as Councilman Shishka suggested, on the worm to the
Happy
rest of the
to.
council.
Just guide it through that
Yeah. Okay.
lens versus the bigger lens.
Okay. And now announcements.
If you don't mind, could I just do a little recap on that?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian.
And just from perspective, because Leslie provided so much information there, and I just wanted to kind of see if I could kind of focus it all in to what we're working on. And we know at this point that we've changed a couple of different policies, and those policy changes are dramatic. We went from an accounting exercise to a dynamic model that we were trying to use to predict actual water use. And that was a big undertaking. So we're going through some growing pains with that. We're finding these growing pains out, and we've given you a couple examples today. So what is the basis of the fix? There's a lot of moving parts in it, but it is fixable. It's completely fixable. The contracts that are used in development agreements are not standardized. They're done over negotiations. So none of the contracts are the same in terms of how the water is allocated. Okay. That in itself is probably not something that we're going to standardize, but it is something we can be aware of. And if we're aware of it, if the proper departments are aware of it, they can provide the information necessary to understand what the implication of those contracts are. So that's one of the keys, is working with the people who are doing the development agreements, the contracts, with the Water Resources Department, with the Community Development Department. So that's a key issue. Definitions of uses. Leslie went through committed, projected, future, existing. At least 2 of those had different definitions. Existing, committed, ADWR committed from a development agreement standpoint. So we have a lot of definitions. So when community development, or let's say legal, or somebody is working through some of these contracts, we need to be communicating with them so that we can understand what their definition or what is going on those contracts, so we can apply it in the right version of the worm, scenario of the worm, understand where that water is going to be slotted into existing, committed, future. So that's a huge aspect of what we need to do. So and then there's the aspect of land planning with community development and working with those people to understand when there's a possibility of going from 36 multifamily units to 209. It's not something that's not going to happen, right? I mean, zoning, people come in for zoning ordinance changes all the time, and sometimes they're needed. They're needed to fill in what the community needs. They make sense from a standpoint. An area builds up around it, and its old zoning conditions don't meet the requirements of that community anymore. Again, it's just about understanding it, because once we understand it, then we can get it into the worm, and we can account for it, and then we can project. We have the 25 and the 25 that I presented earlier. The 25 acre feet budget for residential and non-residential uses. Those are great tools for an understanding of how much water you're allocating at any given time. And to give a kind of a, we think about it as a budgeting process, but sometimes we don't budget just to the $0 in our account. Sometimes we budget, we want to control our spending. We just want to know what we spent in a month. So that's a great tool for that, kind of in the moment. What have we done over the course of January to July? But the worm is the one that we want to go back to on a semi-annual and a yearly basis to understand the dynamic moving of the water based on the usage and be able to project. So that's those two things I don't think are independent. I don't think we'd have to scrap the 25-25. I don't think we might want to, but I don't think it's necessary to do that. I think it's a good tool in its own right for a checkpoint understanding. But we've got to develop the worm to get to that point where we can understand where are we going on our trajectory. We were going on this trajectory in 2023, and in 2024 we started to go up. Okay, now we understand where we're going with our water use, and we can apply and use those decisions when development comes in and other things to understand, what's the implication of continuing to approve development at this pace or that pace or whatever.
Okay.
Those are the things we're trying to determine at this point, and Leslie is identifying some of these issues, and that communication level between all those people I just talked about, that's what we're going to do in order to get everybody on the same page and get through these growing pains where we move from we get to a policy where we really are understanding what we're doing with our water at any given point in time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Any announcements?
I don't have any.
Okay, item, 5, general announcements from staff.
Good morning, Steve Olfers, Utilities Manager. I've been asked to give an update on our most recent sanitary sewer overflow that occurred in Granite Creek Park in middle March. We had 10 manholes throughout the city that had SSOs, and we've been working with ADEQ and our engineering group to try to find solutions so that it doesn't happen again. We have different plans to upgrade the system to keep these from occurring, and we are working with ADEQ to ensure that we are staying in compliance with everything that they set forth. Everything has been cleaned up. All the bacterial counts and everything within the lakes and rivers or streams are back to normal or even below normal. So the system is recovered, and I just wanted to take any questions if there were some.
Thank you. I went out to Granite Creek Park right after the cruise had finished, and it was immaculate. You couldn't even tell that anything had happened there. And as I understand, the Watson Lake was only closed due to high E. coli levels for just about 5 days, and then it got back to its regular levels.
To be honest, I don't know when it was open or closed, but the bacterial level counts certainly came down quite quickly.
Yeah.
And being it already a low contact reservoir, we really didn't have a lot of restrictions. Just didn't want anybody wading in and getting in that contamination.
Yeah, and that water event was very unprecedented. I've lived here in Prescott since 1986, and there's only been one other time where I've seen Granite Creek almost crest the bridge there at Mile High Middle School. It was similar, but so this isn't like this is happening every year, every time it rains. This was just an unbelievable, unprecedented amount of water that overwhelmed our storm sewer system.
It really overwhelmed all of our systems, including our lakes, and obviously we're still releasing from Willow. Well, we will be releasing again from Willow Lake for our recharge efforts. The good news is that because we had such a wet winter, we're well on our way to meeting our recharge goals. So
Yeah.
we had a lot of water go through the systems, and we have recovered. Now it's just taking care of all the paperwork that comes along with
Yeah.
those types of situations.
Well, building on that, I have a rain gauge in my yard. I live on the southwest side of town, and through January through April 2023, this year, we had 14.5 inches of moisture this winter, and our 30-year norm's about 18 inches. So it was very, very unusual.
Well, it's very good. It's made it for quite a beautiful spring around the state.
Yeah. Okay. Any more?
No, I just wanted
Announcements?
to answer any questions that you might have had with that event.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the clarification. I'm sure the public's happy to know.
Thank you.
And before we adjourn, I just would like everyone to know that I spoke with Council Member Brandon Montoya, and he is participating in the meeting remotely. Okay, so he's absence, but as far as I'm concerned, he's excused. I think as the chair of this committee, I'm going to give him an excusal and not an absent.
Okay, I just want to clarify that he's not participating remotely, he's viewing.
He's viewing remotely.
Yes, okay.
He would participate if we were allowed to Zoom, but I guess we're not allowed to Zoom anymore.
Yeah, that wasn't indicated early
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
on, I
he is.
believe.
Yeah, but he did let me know that he was going to be watching us.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. Well, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.